Welcome to this How to Research and Write Study Skills session. My name is Ellesse.
And my name's Heather.
And we are part of the award-winning STEM response team at the University of Wolverhampton. In this study skills session, I'll be discussing how to research and also how to write assignments.
And I'll be discussing also how to research and also how to reference.
Thank you for watching and we hope you enjoy.
So in the first part of today's session, we're going to be discussing how to research. So how to research is really important as at sixth form and at college and at university, you'll be undertaking assignments or dissertations and essays which you'll need to research information for. And to do this, you need to find credible sources to get your information from. And these can be things such as journal articles or other sources such as like Google Scholar and other credible websites on the internet. Of course, you want to stay away from uncredible websites such as Wikipedia and small domain websites, as this information may not be reliable. Once you've found the website or source that you're going to use to try and find information from, it is best to start with searching for simple keywords. And the keywords you'll be using are related to the topic or area that you're going to be researching. So once I've searched my keywords, you may have thousands and thousands of results that pop up. And again, this may be a bit intimidating at first, but do not worry. If you do have too many results, you can pinpoint your keywords and your focal area a bit more precise, so use more keywords or be more specific in your searches. But when you come across any kind of material that you think may be useful, it is best to read the abstract. The abstract is a great way for you to decide whether you're going to be using this journal article or this source, as this basically summarises the whole paper and tells you all the information you may need to know without reading the whole thing, as this may waste your time if it's irrelevant to the topic that you're looking for. So if you begin by reading your abstracts, you'll be able to know all the information that is needed, and then you can decide whether you'd like to use this paper or not.
So once we have our papers that we want to use, we've read the abstracts and we agree that they're on our topic, that's when we're going to start picking out the key points of those papers. Now, everyone does this differently, so I'm just going to tell you the way that I do it. You can try it out at home if you want to, try out different ways too. It's whatever way is easier for yourself, because everyone has their own special way. But the way I do it, once I have all my papers saved, I open them up one by one and read through. As I'm reading through, any piece of information or any point that is relevant to what I'm writing, I'll simply copy and paste onto a Word sheet. And on that Word document, I'll have the title of the page open, I'll have the reference underneath, which we'll go through later about how to reference, and then I'll just copy and paste those points all under there. So once I've finished reading the whole paper, I'll then have a whole Word document full of the key points from that paper. So when it comes to writing, I can base my actual essay or my report off those key points. Some people prefer to actually write what they're writing first and then find points to back it up. That's totally okay. That's however you work. But this is how I do it, for example. I just find it helps me construct those arguments better, as I already have a kind of idea of what I'm going to be writing. So once you have your research, it's time to write your assignment. And we'll go through the different types of assignments now. So when you're at sixth form or college doing your BTECs or A-levels, and even when you're at university, you'll find you have a range of assignments to do in different styles too. So these can range from essays, reports and scientific reports, but they can also span across posters and leaflets and presentations. We have a whole study skills session just on presentations for you to watch later. But for this session, we're going to be focusing just on essays, reports and scientific reports. Now, you might all think they sound the same, so we're going to break them down and analyse what is different about those three. So starting with essays, if you've just come from school or if you've done your A-levels and you're going into HE, you should already, hopefully, be familiar with the essay structure. So your essays is just a continuous piece of writing, which is usually a response to a question in an assignment brief or even an exam question. and you're just collecting unbiased points from a source of information and kind of explaining that in a way that the viewers will understand, maybe adding your own interests and own views into that too. But it is basically just one big piece of writing that you've sectioned into paragraphs. So when you come to write your essays, like with most pieces of writing, you'll always start with an introduction. So your introduction, as the name suggests, introduces the subjects to the reader. So here you're going to be telling the reader what your essay is about and what the main focus of the essay is. Once you've done that, you'll go into the main body of points. Now this main body of points can be structured in the PEE structure, which, if you remember from school, is point, evidence, explain. So you'll be using probably one paragraph per point. You'll introduce the point that you're trying to make. You'll show the evidence of where you have that point from, so the sources that you're referencing, and then you'll explain it. So what is that point trying to make? And this is a section where you can also add your own expertise too. After that, you'll go and conclude your essay in the conclusion. One thing I will say, in your conclusions, it is just a summary of the key points you've made. You don't want to be making any additional points in this conclusion. It's just a summary of what you've said. If you feel you have a new point to add it into the main body in a new paragraph. The next assignment type we're going to look at is reports. Now, these are quite similar to an essay, but they're very clear and concise, and unlike the essay, which is just a continuous piece of writing, reports will often have headings and subheadings to break it up into sections. And you can feel free to use pictures and figures such as graphs and also tables to really drive forward your point. Like everyone says, a picture does say 1,000 words, so they can be really useful. For example, when you're writing a report, if you want to use headings and subheadings, let's just use an example from my degree course. So I studied like animal behaviour. So say I'm writing a report on the success of breeding and reintroduction into the wild. I'll have my introduction about why breeding is important and why reintroductions are important, and then I'll go into my main body. Remember, like with your essays, is where you say all your points, you cite the evidence, and then you explain. But with your report, I would section this into different subheadings. So I might have a subheading after my introduction saying, what is breeding and reintroduction? And I'd explain that. Then I might have considerations for breeding, and then I might have after that conservation impacts, and then even maybe another one saying previous successes. So you're saying all the points you need to say, but it's broken down into clear and concise sections. And again, always finish off with a conclusion. The last assignment type I want to talk about are scientific reports. And these will be especially important if your A-level or BTEC or university degree is based in one of the STEM subjects. Unlike your essays and reports, these scientific reports are usually set when you have like a practical exam or you have to write up what you've been doing in the lab or in the field. So they're very similar to an actual report where you have your sections and it's clear and concise, and you can use pictures and figures and graphs, but they do have a different format, and it's a universal format too. So every scientific report will be round about the same in how they're laid out. So this looks very confusing, I know, but I'm going to talk through it. Remember how I said earlier about the abstract? The abstract is a bit like a blurb, for example, of what your paper entails. So it will cover a tiny bit of the introduction and the methods you use, and then a small bit on the results and conclusion. So it's like a mini snapshot that the reader can have into your paper without having to read the whole thing. Then again, your introduction, this is where you'll describe your literature review and any important information and background reading. And then you move on to your methods. Your methods section is going to tell the reader exactly step by step how you did your experiment or how you did your fieldwork. So you'll want to describe all the equipment you used, and you want to have it so detailed that the person reading can actually replicate your experiment or fieldwork just by reading this method section. If you've done your experiment not inside a lab and outside, you would include a site description and location of that spot also. Then you move on to your results. Your results section is where you'd put all your tables and graphs if you have them, or any other way you would lay your results out. Now, you don't want to talk about your results too much in detail, as this will be in your discussion. Your results clearly just show the results of your experiment in a graph or however you want to. Your discussion is then where you explain those results in more detail and link your findings to findings in the research you've just done, and really link the two to really back your points up. Then, like with the previous two, you have your conclusion where you just summarise what your project has found. Again, not including any new points.
So the final aspect we're going to be covering today is how to reference. So what is referencing? Referencing is you essentially giving credit to somebody for taking a snapshot or a quote from their piece of work, and this could be from a book, a journal article, or even possibly a website. Something that you have taken and put into your essay, a literature review, or possibly even dissertation, or as mentioned previously, like lab reports, as this is backing up or supporting or maybe even disputing something that you have found or stated. So how do we reference? There are many different ways to reference, and it all depends on your institution, as different institutions have different referencing formats that they prefer. We have APA, MLA, and also Harvard referencing. So it's vital that you check with the institution that you're at what kind of referencing they prefer, and on their website usually they'll have a detailed bit where they explain what kind of referencing they want you to use, and also all about the referencing and how specifically they want you to do this referencing. So do make sure you check your institution's website, as it'll have all the details on there. Like at the University of Wolverhampton, we use Harvard referencing. So there's two types of referencing really that we'll cover just briefly today. There's in-text citations, and this is normally brackets that appear beside a quotation or at the end of like a paraphrase of a source. And there's also a full reference, which will be at the end in your reference list at the very end of your work. So firstly, we're going to cover how to do APA reference. So for the in-text citation, if there's one author, you just simply state the surname of the author and the year. And with two authors, you do both surnames in the year. However, if there's 6 or more authors, you do the surnames et al., which means and others, and also the year. For the full reference, you want to include things such as the full surnames of the authors and also the initial of their first and middle name. And this doesn't matter if there's more than 6, you include literally everyone who has contributed to this piece of work. You need to include the date which was published, the title of the source, the location of the publisher and the publisher itself, and also where you retrieved this document from. Next, we're going to briefly cover MLA referencing. And if you have one author, you simply just state the surname of that author and then the page or page range which you have gathered this information from. If there's 2 to 3 authors, you simply do the same. You state all their surnames and then the page or page range. However, if there's 4 or more authors, you say their surname, et al., meaning and others again, and the page or page range. So for the full reference that you'll put in your reference list at the very end of your work, you'll include all of the authors' names, you'll include the title of the source, the title of container and other contributions that may be included, the version, such as maybe the volume or edition of the book, numbers, this can be like pages or issue numbers, the publisher, the publication date, and also the location of which it was published. And finally, we have Harvard referencing. So for the in-text citations, if you have one author, you do the surname and the year. If you have 2 or 3 authors, you do their surnames and then the year. And if you have 4 or more authors, you do the surname et al. And then the year. For a full reference, you do the author's surname and then the author's initials, followed by the year that this article or journal was published, the title of the article, the edition, so once again, how many editions this book has, or maybe even how many volumes this journal book has, the city in which it was published, and also the publisher, and then followed by numbers, which could be the page numbers or chapter in a book. So finally, I know this is a lot of information to take in, but there are online sites and software that can help you do your referencing. So you have things such as RefWorks, Cite This For Me, and Mendeley, and these are good as they will help you do your referencing. However, it is vital that you understand the referencing that your institution wants you to use, as sometimes these sites can be unreliable and may get the referencing wrong. So if you know how to format the referencing, it will be good for you to either do the references yourself, or if you do use one of these sites, to check the references they produce so you don't have any kind of negative impacts when you submit wrong references into the piece of work that you're submitting.
So that was just a quick introduction of how to research and write for further education and also higher education. We hope we've answered any questions that you might have, and stay tuned for so much more study skills.